Hey Laravel developers, welcome back to Programming Fields. I'm Umesh Rana. If you have been following our Laravel 11 design patterns playlist, you know we are on an incredible journey to mastering clean, scalable and maintainable code in Laravel. Today we will dive into the factory design pattern. But before that, let me quickly recap what we have covered so far in this playlist. So firstly, we covered up the repository design pattern in which we show how we can abstract database queries for clean and scalable data access. Then we implemented the service layer pattern in which we centralized the business logic to keep your controllers lightweight and focused. Furthermore, we implemented the observer pattern in which we set up the event-driven system for better decoupling and extensibility. If I will come to the code editor, inside this, we created this architecture to follow the repository and service design pattern. If I will expand the code base here, inside the project folder, we have the app folder. Inside this, we implemented the repository pattern and therefore we have the interfaces folder for this to-do interface. Inside this, we defined these two functions to get and save to-do. Respective to this interface, we created this repository class. Inside this, we implemented those methods. Alright. Furthermore, we implemented the service pattern as well, in which we created this to-do service class, and this service class has been called inside the controller. So we have the respective controllers as to-do controller. Inside this, we called the to-do service, and also we implemented the observer patterns for capturing the to-do save event. So whenever we were creating a to-do list using that to-do model, we were capturing that event. So we created one observer for that to do, and here we were sending one notification to all the users for that newly created to do. So that was about the observer pattern. Now in today's video, we are going to cover up the factory design pattern. So this pattern is perfect for creating clean, reusable logic for object creation. And we are applying it to a user registration system. That's why we have created a user registration form here. So by applying the factory design pattern on this registration form, I will show you how you can make your Laravel apps more professional and future proof. So by the end of this video, you will have a solid understanding of the factory pattern and you will have a reusable structure that separates object creation, persistence and the business logic. But before moving to the practical implementation, let me quickly add the today's outline so that we will see what we are going to cover in this video. Firstly, we will see what is the factory pattern and why it is so beneficial. Next, we will see how we can set it up in Laravel 11 application. And in this video, we will set it up for the user registration. Setup for the user registration. Alright. So let's start with what is the factory pattern and why it is so beneficial. So the factory design pattern is all about creating objects. So just imagine you need to create a user instance in multiple places, but you don't want to keep repeating that same code everywhere. That's where a factory pattern comes in. So this will centralize the logic for creating objects and this will make your application cleaner and more maintainable. So in the simple terms, you can say the factories abstract the object creation process and this ensures that object creation logic is reusable and they keep your code consistent. Now we will talk about why this is so beneficial. So the first and very important thing is this centralized the object creation. So all logic for creating objects will be in one place and that will make it easier to manage and reusable. So you can reuse the factory class across your application and this will avoid duplicate code. Also this provides the clean code because this separates object creation from other business logic and this makes your code more readable and maintainable. Last but not least, the flexibility. So if the object creation process changes, you only need to update the factory, not every instance where that object is created. So this is all about the factory pattern. Now let's come to the implementation of this with the user registration system. So we will be working on the setup of this factory design pattern with the user registration system. So inside the code base, I have created a controller. Inside HTTP controllers, I have a fresh user controller. Inside this, I just rendered out this users.indexBleed. So inside the resources views, I have a folder as users. Inside this, I created a blade as index.blade. Inside this index blade, I have a basic registration form in which I have extended a master layout for bootstrap layout. Inside this, I have created a card, and here I already captured the session flash message for success and error. Next, we have the form. Inside this, I have added the form action to submit this form on this route as users.store, and this is post method here. We have the field as name, email, password and phone number. Also, we captured the validation error message here, but we have not added the server side validation for this form. Okay, so this is just an empty form here. If I will come to the browser, this is the representation of this form. Here we don't have this submit functionality here. If I will try to submit, this is submitting on the blank route because that method has not any form handling functionality. Okay, so let's come to the setup of this factory pattern first. I will come to the code editor, and currently if we'll take a look to this folder structure, inside app we have the interfaces folder, we have the repositories folder, and we have the services as well. So for maintaining the factory design pattern, I will set up a different architecture. So I will come to this outline.md file, and here I will remove this architecture. So I will remove this controller, interface, repositories and the services things, and inside app I will create one directory as factories. Inside this factories folder we will have user factory class. So we will create user factory class. Next we will require services, and we already have one services directory. So I will add that services directory here because we are going to follow that. Inside services we need user service, alright, so that we can manage the business logic inside that user service. So let's quickly set up this architecture for this factory design pattern. So I will come to the terminal and I will create one class as user factory inside the factories folder. Currently we don't have any factories folder here. Okay, so let's create that. Inside the terminal I will type php artisan make class, and here we will have to provide the class name, but before that I will provide the directory name as factories. Inside this I will specify the class name as user factory. Let's hit enter. Yes, this has created the user factory class. Next we have to create the user service. So we already have the services directory inside the project folder. So I will specify the directory name here as services, and I will specify the class name as user service. Let's hit enter. Yes, we have the user service class now. If we'll check out the factories, here we have the user factory class, and next we have the user services class inside the services folder. So this is done. But before writing the business logic, firstly we will have to update the migration. So I will come to the database migration. Inside the users table migration, I will add one field as phone number because in the form we have additional field as phone number. So I will quickly add that field here. This will be string phone number, and respective to this we will have to add that in a fillable property inside the user model. So after the password I will add phone number. Now we will have to rerun the migration. So I will come to the terminal. I will type php artisan migrate fresh. Okay, this is done. Now let's come to the business logic of this factory implementation. So let's come to the controller. Inside the user controller we have the store function defined here. From here we will call the user service. So here we will have to create a constructor first. So I will create constructor function, public function construct. Inside this I will inject user service and will create one instance as user service. Let's define a variable here. So I will define protected user service, and I will assign this user service to this user service. Okay, this is done. Now from this store function, I will call user service and I will specify a function as create and save user. Okay, and inside this function we'll have to provide the form request. So as of now, I will pass the validated form request here. So regarding the form validation rule, we can write it here or we can create a separate form request for that. That is up to you. So as of now, I will create a separate form request class for that form. So I will come to the terminal and here I will type PHP artisan make request user registration request. Now let's come to that class. Inside request we have the user registration request. Let's add the basic validation rules here. Firstly, we'll have to authorize this. Inside this rules array, let's add validation rules for field as name required, email will be required, unique, and this will check from the user's email. Okay. Next we have password field. This will be required. Min, this will be 5 characters. Next we have the phone number field. Okay, this will be required. This will accept digits and maximum this will be 10 digits. Okay. Now inside the user controller, instead of this eliminate HTTP request, I will inject user registration request here. And inside this create and save user function, I will pass this request object. Now let's come inside this user service and let's define this function. Here I will define function create and save user. This function will accept form request, so we will have to capture it here. Now from this function we will have to trigger the factory. So for saving the user data, we will have to create an object of the user model. So here inside this user service constructor, I will inject factory. So we have the user factory class and I will create one instance as user factory here. Okay. And again we will have to create one variable as protected user factory and I will assign this user factory to this user factory instance. Alright, this is done. Now here inside this create and save user function, I will call user factory and I will call one function as let's suppose create or create user. Alright, just like this. Inside this I will pass the request data. Now let's copy this function. Let's come to the factory class. Inside the user factory, here I will define that function create user. Okay, and here I will capture that request or we can write user request just like this. Alright, so now we will have to create an object of the user model because we are going to insert the data into the users table. So we will be using the user model for following the eloquent approach. And here the factory will create one instance of that user model. So we will create an instance of the user model using new keyword and here we will have to import the user model just like this. Now inside this user model function, I will pass this form request data that we have captured from the service. So I will pass this data here and we will have to return this instance to this service back. Okay. Let me add the annotation here. Function create user and this will accept the parameter as user request. Okay. And this will return the user model instance. So we will have to specify the return type as well. So I will write return app models user and here I will specify the return type as user model instance. This is fine. So this is basically factory pattern here. Here this is just creating one instance of this user model And after creating this instance with the data, this will return the instance to the user service back. And here we will have to capture that instance as user. Again, let me add one annotation for this function as create and save user. Inside the parameter, this is accepting request. Now regarding the return type, we will specify it later. So after getting the user instance data, we will have to save that instance so that this will dump the record inside the users table. So if I will add dump and die $user here, and if I will come to the controller, we have the user controller here. From this controller, we are triggering this create and save user function. So this request will come to the service. Inside this service, this will trigger this user factory class. There we initialized the user model, and after passing the data, we have just created the object of that user model, and this will return that user model instance back to the user service. Here we captured that and we added dump and die. Now inside the user factory, we passed the form request data. Okay, so this model will accept the user request data in the form of array. So we will have to pass the data in the form of array here. So if I will come to the service, from here we are passing the entire data, whatever we are receiving it from the controller. So here I will use the request validated function so that this will capture the validated data from this user registration request class in the form of array. So now here in the service, we will receive the array data. So this is type of array. Okay, and inside the user factory, we will have the form request data in the form of array. Alright, this is done. Now let's come to the browser. Let's refresh the application. And firstly, let's try to click on register so that we will check our form validation is working or not. Yes, the basic form validation is working here as per the defined validation rules. Now let's try to register our first user. So I will register admin. I will specify email as admin@test.com, password 123456778, and phone number will be 12345678910. Now let's try to click on register. Yes, here we can see we got the dumped result of the user model instance. Okay, here we have the name, email and password field. Here we have the fillable property as well. So we are receiving the user model instance here. Now we will have to persist this model instance so that we can save the data inside the user table. So let's implement that functionality. So after receiving the user model instance, I will call the user model save function. This is our eloquent model function. Now before saving the user form request data to the user table, we will have to modify the phone number field, because in the migration we have defined the field name in the underscore form. So here we have added the phone number as underscore, but in the form request we are receiving this in the form of camel case. So we will have to specify that field name here as phone number. This will be request phone number, just like this. Alright, and regarding the password, we will have to convert that in the form of hash. So I will change the password as hash request password, or we can use bcrypt as well, that depends on you. So we will use hash : make function, just like this. This is fine. Now I will add dump and die again here, and if we'll check here by refreshing this form again, this is saying phone number on array. Yes, because that request validate function have changed the data set in the form of array. So we will have to capture it in this way. Same thing for this password. Okay. If I will reload this, yeah, in the attributes we have the 4 fields here. Now the phone number field has been included. Okay, because this matched with the fillable property and with the migration. Now we can save this data in the user model to persist the data. So here I will remove this dump and die, and I will save this data. So I will reload this application again. Yes, the user data has been saved into the users table. If I will come to the database, inside the users table, yes, here we have one entry. Alright, now we can capture one response here. So I will return this to the controller. Inside the user controller, I will capture the response as user, and here I will check if we have user created. I will return back it with success, and I will set the session message as user registered successfully. For the else part, I will just duplicate this, and here I will set with error as unable to register user. Please try again. This is fine. Now let's come to the browser again. Let's go back. Let's refresh. Now let's try to register one more user. I will type user@test.com, password 1234567 phone number. Let's click on register. Yes, we received the message as user registered successfully. Now let me quickly explain what I have done in the factory design pattern. So inside the controller, I injected this user service class, and inside that user service we have the create and save user function called. Inside this function, I have passed the validated form data that is coming through this user registration request form class. Inside the user service, here we have the constructor function in which I have injected the user factory, and this user factory is just for creating an instance of the user model. So that is the main purpose of this factory design. The factory will abstract the object creation mechanism. Okay, so inside the user factory, we have one function as create user. Alright, so we have called it from this user service class. This is create user model instance or object. Okay, and after creating the user model instance with the dataset, here I am just modifying the data before saving it to the users table. So if I will come to the create user function inside the user factory class, here we have the user model instance that is just creating an object, and this is capturing the user request data in the form of array, and here this is returning the model instance. Here we imported the user model. Here is the difference to understand. Here we just created an instance of the user model. We are not saving the data. That means here we are not persisting the data into the users table. Only we are just creating an instance and we are returning it back to the user service. Now in the user service, again we are capturing that instance and we are persisting data here. Alright. So this is the difference between the repository and factory design pattern. In the repository pattern, we communicate with the database directly in the repository class, but in the factory, we are not communicating with the database, only we are just creating an object and we are persisting that here in the service itself. Okay. So in the factory design pattern, we can reuse this object creation methodology for using this in multiple places. Now here, after registering the user, if you want to display the user's record here just after this form, then we will define one more function here inside this service itself. So I will define one function, fetch users. This won't take any parameter and this will return collection here. So I will define function as fetch users, and here we will have to call the user model. So we'll write user : all function, and I will return the all user data here, and let's import this user model. So for fetching the user data, we cannot go with the factory design pattern because the factory design pattern is only for object creation. Here we are writing the business logic directly, so it is not recommended to write this in the factory. Okay, the factory is just for creating and abstracting the object creation from this service layer. So now we will have to call this function inside the user controller, index function. So we will call $this user service fetch users, and we will have to capture this $users here. Okay, and next we can pass this in the form of compact. Okay, and you can render this here inside the users.indexBlade. So here after this div, I will render the users record. So as of now, I will create ul and li. Inside this, I will render the users record using the for else $users as $user, and I will move this li inside the for else block. Here I will display user name, email and phone number. In the empty block, I will add no data found. Let's come to the browser. Let's refresh. Yes, here we are getting the users record. Here I will add one blind break. Okay, this is fine. So by using this way, we can implement the factory design pattern in Laravel for the object creation. And that's it for today. We have successfully built a user registration system using the factory design pattern in Laravel 11. Let's quickly recap what we have covered so far in this playlist. Firstly, we covered up the repository pattern for abstracting the data access layer. Next, we implemented the service pattern for keeping the business logic clean and reusable. Thereafter, we implemented the observer pattern for the event-driven systems. And now, in today's video, we covered up the factory patterns for centralized the object creation. So we have created this user factory here, and we kept it for reusable purpose as centralized object creation methodology. In the next video, we will dive into the singleton pattern. So the singleton pattern helps manage global state in your Laravel applications. Therefore, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss it. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to Programming Fields. And let me know which design patterns or Laravel features you would like me to cover next. So thank you for watching. Keep learning, keep coding, and I will see you in the next video. Until then, happy coding.